It's the Big Fat American Rock Show with Zach Martin. We have a very special guest, a longtime friend of mine, great author from New York, Mark Bego. New York Times bestselling author, has a record number of books due to hit the stores in 2019, including a book with Mary Wilson of the Supremes and an expanded biography of Sir Elton John. And before we get to your rock bio, Mark, what did you think about the recent biopic about Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody?
Oh, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I really think that's the greatest rock and roll movie made. It just used the music perfectly, kept the audience engaged, and made me want to, go out and start playing all those hits again on vinyl and on CD and everything else. I think it's just marvelous what they've done.
When you were watching it, did you get so engrossed to the point where you thought you were actually seeing the guys in Queen circa 1976, 77, 85?
Absolutely. The actor who played Brian May,
yes.
Just a dead ringer. And all the guys, just amazing. And the job that was done with Freddie's role, my God.
Oh, yeah.
Just amazing. Definitely the Best Actor of the Year award was very justified.
Well, I voted for him also for Best Actor SAG-AFTRA category. I thought the movie was phenomenal. I couldn't believe it still got some negative reviews. I don't know why. There's always got to be a wet blanket of a review. Why do you think it got negative reviews?
Some people are just, sour grapes on these things, and they wanted to see a different kind of movie. It wasn't the Freddie Mercury movie. It was the Queen movie. So you have to keep that in mind. Everyone's like, well, we should have, seen more of the next couple years when he was, suffering from AIDS and towards the end of his life and what have you. But I think that would have been a completely different film. And I think what they did was they captured the best excitement of Queen and really, really made it work in that movie. It made me want to run out and buy the soundtrack album immediately. I'm still an album buyer.
Yeah.
I'm not a download person. I'm a go out and get the CD or the vinyl kind of guy.
I can understand that. I like the tactile interaction with the product as well, like the vinyl, as you said. And I will say that the soundtrack is totally awesome, remixed masters of the various tracks that are featured in a movie by Queen. Now, what I liked about the biopic myself, and then we'll move on to your rock bio, was the fact that it didn't dwell on Freddie Mercury's sexuality, nor did it dwell on him dying from HIV/AIDS. I thought it was done really well in a respectful way. And I will say this, I will admit, at the end of the movie, my wife and I, we both cried. And I don't know why I cried, maybe because I know what actually happened to Freddie, and I know the sad story about it.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was such a wonderful, loving tribute to a man, and it didn't cheapen him, because that's what we do in society. We try to take the what we consider maybe the ugliness or the salacious part, and we overblow that part, and we miss out the true art of it, or the true beauty, or the true love, those kind of things.
It's so true. Exactly what you said. Look at, we're seeing it happen with Michael Jackson this year with the documentary about him. All of a sudden, there's a sort of a backlash to some of his music. Yet, he had his own demons, I guess you could say. So where does the story of the artist and where does the music begin? What is it we admire about the music, and is that eradicated if we know too much about the person's personal life?
Yeah, I guess that can cross over into any sort of entertainment or sports medium when you think about it. For instance, baseball, Pete Rose, and gambling. So he doesn't get into the... Then you have a guy like Lawrence Taylor who did horrible things after he makes it into the Hall of Fame. Does that make him no longer a Hall of Famer? Then you have Kate Smith, who sings a song, I don't know, from 1930. I don't even know what the song is. I kind of listened to it, and I'm like, all right, for the time, I guess she didn't even realize that it was racist. So now we're going to go back in time and remove people from history. I have a little bit of a problem with that. I also have a problem with the whole Michael Jackson thing, in that the man's no longer alive to defend himself. I know that, there's some ugly parts of the story, but does that mean that we no longer play any Michael Jackson song? So I think that the answer is, if it's not something you're into, you don't have to listen, you don't have to watch. I go by this old saying, de gustibus non est disputandum. Taste is not to be argued, but let's move along to...
I love that.
Isn't that great? That's going to be my book, De Gustibus Non Est Disputandum, and then people wonder what that means. Let's go over to Mark Bego. And you are an amazing, talented man, an author of,
Well,
I don't know how many books you've authored, but each and every one of them. 57. That's amazing. 57 books. And
67.
67. Okay, my hearing is gone. 67 books. And every time you and I have gotten together, and every time you've released a book, it's always been not only fun hanging out with you, and always an event, like an Andy Warhol type of event when you release a book, but also your books are incredible. So why don't you give us a little bit of your rock bio before we talk about the books that are coming out for 2019?
Well, thank you. I moved to New York City in 1974 with my clippings from my college newspaper, determined to become the next big rock and roll writer in New York. Well, it took a while. I used to type contracts at Grosset and Dunlap Publishers. That was one of my very first jobs, and it actually taught me what it was like to be under contract to a publishing house. I used to type Norman Mailer's foreign contracts for Grosset when he had that Marilyn Monroe book, if anyone remembers that from way back, a fabulous picture book. And it showed me what the business was like. And it ended up that my boss from Grosset and Dunlap ended up buying my first two books, Barry Manilow and The Captain and Tennille. That'll give you, really gives you an idea of my age. I was 2 at the time.
Right. You were a prodigy, a writing prodigy, and you wrote those. Now, that would be at the height of their popularity for Barry Manilow and The Captain and Tennille, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the reason they chose those is because they had #1 hits, and they also had big TV exposure. Captain and Tennille had their own TV show. Barry was doing specials for ABC TV, so they were very popular at the time. And it sort of gave me the moniker of predicting who would really sell, who was coming up in the next year, who I thought was really predictably a big hit. And this happened in 1984 when I convinced Pinnacle Books into doing a book on Michael Jackson. I said, I'm here. I was at CBS Records at the time as a writer, writing the ad blurbs for Columbia Record Club's catalog.
Oh, wow.
And I saw the kind of money they were pumping into Michael Jackson's Thriller. So I told this company, I said, they're not done promoting this. He's going to be huge in 1984. So they took a chance. The book I wrote, called Michael with an exclamation mark, came out in February of 1984, the week that he caught his hair on fire doing the Pepsi commercials. I sold 8 million books in 8 languages.
Gosh, really? Holy cow. Now, did you get $1 per book? How did that break out?
Well, back then, especially, a large part of the market was small paperbacks. So we're talking about a paperback book that I think retailed for $3.50. So I got, I don't know, like 50 cents on a book or something like that.
Well, that's still pretty darn good,
That was
right?
still pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So then the next year they said, okay, now who's going to be big next year? And I said, well, there's this girl from my hometown, Pontiac, Michigan, and she really seems to be creating a lot of fervor around her debut album, and she's about to release this big album, and I think she's going to be big, and she calls herself Madonna. So
wow.
I did that book, another million seller.
So another $500,000. Okay, I'm keeping track.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. So then Whitney Houston did the same thing with Whitney Houston. Then Sade. Then Julian Lennon. So it just kept going on, and which is marvelous. But I also had a great lust for a lot of the classic artists, and one of my first classic artist books at that time was Aretha Franklin, and I did that for the first time in 1989, and it's a book that has been a real perennial in my catalog. I have updated it 3 times, most recently in August of last year when she passed away, and it hit #1 in Amazon.com.
Wow,
so,
that's great.
All the way it took. So in other words, 1989, that was the first version came out, and then several years later, I hit #1 with it. So sometimes my predictions are, off by a year or two, but I'm right there. I'm right on target.
I would say you're pretty spot on. So just to take us through it, how did you use your prediction after you left Columbia Records doing those little inserts or descriptions of what they had on sale? At what point did you become a full-time artist, and how did you determine who the next big thing would be?
Well, I started diversifying in 1976 after the company Pinnacle that had the Michael Jackson and Madonna successes was sold to someone. All the editors went to different companies, and in 1976, I had 6 books in the stores.
Wow.
6 new books. I had Sade, I had Whitney Houston. I had my first movie star book, Rock Hudson. Sold 500,000 copies of those. I did TV rock back then, a history of rock and roll on television. And I just kept predicting in the early 90s Vanilla Ice. I sold a ton of Vanilla Ice books that week that he was so hot.
That's great.
Talk about getting it right in there. That was an instant book.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And then I started doing authorized books. I came out here to Tucson, Arizona, where I've lived since 1990. And I did a book with Jimmy Greenspoon of the group Three Dog Night. And he's the one that really convinced me to move to Tucson. He said, I've seen your tiny apartment in New York City. You could own a 3-bedroom house for less money. I was like, no, I couldn't. Yes, you could.
Yep.
And he was right, I could. So I ended up moving out here with all my record albums, all my CDs, all my clippings from all my books and cases of books, and I've been working out of Tucson ever since.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, when you talk about property, I just want to let you know I live in the Republic of Oradell, New Jersey. And there is a new house for sale. It's 7,500 square feet, $1.7 million. And I'm thinking, wow, I just want to bang my head against the wall at that point, and the property taxes. So you made a great move, and you're right. In New York City, how it works, in case you're just tuning in, we're talking to a prolific writer, great rock bio writer, Mark Bego, who's got 67 different books out right now. He's got 2 more on the way for 2019. We'll talk about that in a second. We're talking about his rock bio. But back in the day when you lived in New York City, you'd have a bunch of roommates, and it'd be about 10 to 12 people in a 900-square-foot apartment, 1 bedroom, and everybody would cycle in, cycle out, and it would cost you roughly $1,000 to $2,000 per month, and that doesn't include the utilities.
That was my year, 1976, on 11th Street and Broadway. That was it. 5 of us living there,
right.
sleeping bags everywhere.
Oh, my gosh. And you thought you had it good. Well, you know something? There's some magic to that. Now, if someone was listening and they wanted to be a great writer like yourself, what are some of the keys to writing good books?
Well, I think you have to find your voice in that, read books that you want to read. I mean, I read a lot of rock and roll bios, and I found that the ones I liked the best were the ones that were very conversational. So my style started out that way, being a very conversational tone where I feel like I'm telling the reader this story that I've discovered about this celebrity. Mm-hmm. And that has worked well for me because it keeps it very personal and very friendly. The reader, I think, can find my books very accessible and will learn things along the way about the artist, whether they, intended on or not. Maybe they stumbled into my book and it was midnight and they had nothing else to read. I think they would end up stuck in it, go in a good way, going, oh, my God, I didn't know that about Billy Joel or Elton John or Cher or Bette Midler. And I think that find your tone and, get involved in the publishing business one way or another. I don't care what it is, whether it's typing contracts like I did or, being a secretary at a publishing house. Find out what the publishing business is all about. That was something that was really key to me. And then I really had to start out with knocking on doors, as we all did, and I'm sure you did it with radio stations as well, just trying to get your foot in the door and find your way. Mm. And once you do, just have a lot of integrity about it and write the best books you can, or do, if you're an actor or if you're a radio personality or a television personality, just sink yourself into it and do the best you can, integrity-wise, and I think it will work out. Have a goal. Definitely have a goal.
Well, I wrote one book. It was called Death Angel, based on a true story, true crime series. You might remember that because you and I were...
I do remember when you did that.
And one of the things I liked about it was we got a chapter published in the Sunday New York Daily News, which I thought was incredible.
That's great.
I only made a few $1,000s on it. So when I see it on Amazon to this day and it sells for a nickel, it kind of like, oh boy. But I will tell you, Mark, though, it was not my best work. You want to know why? Because I had the assignment given to me by the publisher in which I had to get it out very fast with another co-writer, Cliff Leindecker, who's fantastic. And it was 100,000 words and had to be done within 6 to 8 weeks because it had to match up with the trial and the sentencing of Charles Cullen and everything that was going on at the time as part of the true crime genre. It was an interesting thing, but I really have stayed away from writing any books nowadays because it's just not my thing. I rather do what I'm doing here. And on occasion, I will write papers because, I do have advanced academic degrees, so I have to write. But I found myself in many occasions, I don't know if you found yourself in this situation where you have to write something, you get a writer's block. It could be about any subject whatsoever. And you know the trick that I did to get out of the writer's block is I would pick up one of your books that I have. Because And
that's great.
Well, here's the reasoning, Mark. I know Mark well. I like Mark. I like his style. It's an easy read. And it got my creative juices flowing. So if you're a writer and you're having a writer's block, pick up a Mark Bego book. There you go.
I love that. Thank you. I'm proud of that. Wow, that's great. Thank you for that accolade.
You don't know who you inspire along the way. So, always got to remember that when you're in the public eye, whether you're an author or a radio personality, television personality, even if you have that one special person that's a big fan of yours, never disappoint them because they count on you so much. Now, Let's go over to what you're releasing in 2019. This is going to be an incredible year for you. I like these books.
Thank you.
Let's start off with, I want to start off with Elton John first because there's the biopic Rocket Man that's coming out.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about your idea with the Elton John book.
Well, it's such a brilliant segue from where we've been talking just moments ago about the Queen movie. The same director is doing the Elton John movie, so we're all hoping that the Elton biopic has the same kind of success. My God, there's sure a story there. I was have been a fan of Elton John since the very beginning. I used to listen to his music in college, and just loved him and have followed him ever since. And the first opportunity I had to write about him in book form was in 2009. And it was a company called Phoenix Books, and it was based in L.A., and it was one of the final books that they did before going bankrupt. I finished off a couple publishers along the way.
Oh, that's good. Bravo. I've always wanted to put a radio station out of business. Yeah, that's great.
Single-handedly, I've had the ability to do that. Well, they put out my book, and it did quite well and got great reviews. In fact, it was named by the London Daily Mail, as one of the top 10 rock bios of 2009. So I thought that was good.
Totally awesome, yes.
And it also is my first book to be in Russian, in Russia.
Oh.
It was translated. So it
show.
Exactly. Has an international appeal. So I love this. And Elton, what a fascinating story. There were so many people to talk to in his past who had worked with him. A lot of people don't realize that he was like a session musician and, worked in nightclubs in London in the 60s. And, in fact, Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells used to go over there, and he would be their piano player when they toured England. So he really has a love of other people's music, was inspired by a lot of American R&B and rock and roll. And he has had a career, as you know, that is just phenomenal. I mean, he does all kinds of things. He's done country-ish music on his Tumbleweed Connection album, and especially recently with the Leon Russell duet album he did. He's great at rock and roll. He's great at poignant Broadway things.
Yes, Broadway. Huh?
I mean, and he's doing more Broadway stuff is upcoming, and it's amazing. Just The Devil Wears Prada is going to be his next musical on Broadway.
And then, of course, he's got his Las Vegas review that he would do for the longest time.
Exactly, and now he's on this 4-year farewell tour. Just amazing, just amazing. I've met him several times. In fact, Mary Wilson of the Supremes and I were at his Oscar viewing party in February of this year, and was great. Mary was sitting next to Quincy Jones. I was sitting next to Liza Minnelli's daughter, Lauren Luft. We had a great time. Diana Ross was there. Mary posed for pictures with Diana, which is a whole other story. But the feud continues.
Yeah, I would imagine.
The Supreme feud continues.
Listen, with women, those feuds go on ad infinitum. They just never end.
Grow up, Diana
right?
Ross.
Exactly.
Grow up.
There's something about Elton John. I wonder how you feel about this. I don't think there's two characters in the life of Elton John. I want to bring up one, and you know that I know him very well. I don't think that Elton John would have been as big if not for Scott Muni at 102.7 WNEW back in the day.
Oh, yes.
And if he's not mentioned in the Rock Bio Rocket Man, and I don't know why nobody came to me and asked, hey, can you play Scott Muni on the radio? Absolutely. Could have done that. But to forget him in the story, I think is really, it really, I think waters it down. I think he adds to the excitement of the Elton John story. Do you mention Scott Muni in your book? If not, why? And do you think he should be mentioned in the biopic if he isn't?
I'm almost positive he is mentioned in there, and he was very crucial in spinning records by Elton at the very beginning and getting behind him. The reason I got into Elton John is I was a huge Three Dog Night fan, and Lady Samantha is on their Suitable for Framing album, and I loved that song. So as soon as Elton had his first album, I was on it. But Scott Muni was really aboard for all that. And the radio broadcast that he did that became, I think it's
11/17/70, I think is the name of the album. But Dave Herman is the one that introduces Elton John on ABC FM.
Another crucial person from New York area radio who really put Elton over the top, definitely. But Elton is someone who... He loved record stores, loves buying records, loves buying music, loves listening to the radio, loves the DJs. He's someone who has immersed himself in the music business, and I think that all of his honors and accolades are well deserved. He's quite an original.
In your book, what do we find out about Elton John that we haven't known before in your mind?
The excessive parties.
Oh, really? Well, I'm not surprised.
Yeah,
okay.
At the party.
Well, that's something different, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I've interviewed a lot of people who were crucial in his life or important in his life at different phases. So I think people will find this very interesting. And I'm updating the 2009 version of my book and adding so much more to it in the middle as well as at the beginning and the end. And actually, I've updated it for Germany already.
Yes, I saw that.
And that book comes out in May in time for the movie, which is great.
Well, that's great because from May 1st to May 10th, I will be in Germany in Munich, and I will make sure that if it's on the bookshelf, I will buy it in German.
Thank you. Thank you.
For my daughter, Sophie, who you might remember was a little baby, who's turning 19 and speaks German fluently.
Oh, my goodness.
Can you believe that?
Sehr gut.
Yeah, that's very good. So, yeah, we're going to be in Munich when your book comes out, and we're going to buy the German copy. It's one of the things that we'll make sure we do. Now let's talk about, and before we get to the book about the Supremes, before we talk about Mary Wilson.
Yes.
I don't know how many people know this, but I am on one of the dust covers of one of your books. Do you remember which one?
Oh, it had to be in the 2004 to 6 era. So it would have been either Joni Mitchell, Jackson Browne, who else?
No, you know what? Joni Mitchell.
Joni.
And I might have been on the Jackson Browne, but I do specifically remember writing something for Joni Mitchell because nobody asked before. I'm like, wow, that's really cool.
I had sense enough to ask a pro.
Yes, you were the first one. And after that, I couldn't stop talking about the book. Oh, make sure you pick up Joni Mitchell by Mark Bego. I mean, that is a terrific way of enhancing your book sales, although they sell themselves. What's the best place to buy your books? Where do people find Mark Bego's collection?
Well, bookstores are, kind of spotty, but you see them as well, and they can certainly. A Barnes and Noble can order them, but BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com has been really good. The internet, of course, is great, but support your local bookstores, please. I love bookstores.
Yeah.
And I'm always going in bookstores and discovering things, and I'm always at the cash register with something new. So those are good. Amazon's good, and globally, all the Amazon sites, the Japanese Amazon, the German Amazon. What I do is I'll look for, like, things that haven't come to this country. So you can go at the bottom of, say, Amazon.com and go into the Japanese area.
Wow.
And, buy things that they have pressed over there that you can't find, or a copy of my book in Japanese that you can't find over here.
Oh, that's awesome. That's almost like in the old days when we'd go out and find 45s from Led Zeppelin, the imports from Japan, and that's where you would get, hey, what can I do? All right, that's fantastic.
Exactly. Like when I lived in the Village, especially, and when I come back to New York, I look for these places. But there used to be a lot of like import record stores, and you go, oh my God, here's the UK version of this album.
Yeah, that's so much better. Yeah, and a tactile interaction. I rather buy the book itself than to download it on the digital version.
I agree.
And I'll tell you something. I've done a lot of academics. It's so much easier for me to learn what's in the book and memorize it when I'm holding it in my hand, as opposed to try to get it all online, or I have to write it down if I'm watching it online, because that's, there's a learning process. I guess maybe kids are changing the way that they learn, but somehow, to me, I don't think you do as well as opposed to having the actual book in your hands.
I totally agree. I mean, I certainly have a Kindle here, and because I had to really see what it looked like to have a book on Kindle, and I get the Kindle version of mine too, just to see how they look, how they are laid out, and what have you. But I prefer a book. I was a couple of years ago, I was meeting Mary Wilson and Bill Wyman of the Rolling Stones in Sweden, and my flight was canceled in Paris, and I had to sit and read all night at the Paris airport waiting for a morning connection. And there is nothing that pisses you off more than being in a good book and your Kindle loses battery power.
Right, and you have to, and you only have an American charger, so you can't.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know exactly how that goes.
Out, you try and find a plug somewhere.
Funny about Bill Wyman, since you mentioned it, he had this book out about the Rolling Stones. And the reason why he did this coffee book, table book, picture book is because when he started out with the Rolling Stones, he didn't think that they were going to go very far, and he wanted to document it so he'd have proof to his kids that he was in a rock band. So the story goes that he's afraid to fly. He's in the studio with me, and it's for a Scott Muni show, and I go, well, if you're afraid to fly, and that's part of the reason why you're going to retire from the Rolling Stones, how the hell did you get here? Did you row over? And he goes, no, I flew. I don't think he thought that was too funny.
Yeah.
But, I was just being inquisitive like I usually am. Now, let's talk about this book that's coming out with Mary Wilson of the Supremes. Give us the title of the book. Also, you mentioned that she's not really getting along with Diana Ross. What's going on there? Maybe give us a quick synopsis of the action that you'll find reading this book.
Well, the book is called Supreme Glamour, and it'll be out in September. It was going to be out in the UK this spring, but I see that they've changed the date to September as well. So
That's
we'll
right.
be promoting it then. Mary and I have been friends since 1975. I was working for a magazine you may remember or may not called Record World.
Of course I remember Record World.
Record World?
Yes.
Yes, Record World, Cashbox, and Billboard.
Yes, Cashbox. Yeah, it was awesome.
Only Billboard exists anymore, but I was writing for Record World magazine. I was making a whopping $5 a review at the time. And, I went up to Rochester, New York to see Mary Wilson at debuting her Supremes act with Sherry Payne and Cindy Birdsong. And we started talking in December of 1975 about doing a book together. Well, guess what? It has taken this long. Meanwhile, 44 years later, we're finally doing a book together. This is a book. I worked on her other two books, but a lot of people worked on them. This is the first one that she and I really just sat down and worked on together. And it's a new telling of the Supreme story. She did a very famous book in the 80s called Dream Girl, My Life as a Supreme, that encompassed the entire Diana Ross era, so the 50s to 1970. Then she did another book called Someday We'll Be Together, and it was the post-Diana years. This puts the stories together without all the extraneous, well, this was going on in Detroit, and this was going on with my parents, and this was, all the side stories are gone. You're getting the straight Supreme story beginning to end, and you really see everybody's true colors in the book. And you can see the ambition of Diana Ross. You can see the sadness of Florence Ballard and the frustration that Mary Wilson had of being in the biggest female recording group ever and watching it fall apart from within. And that's basically what happened. But she is such a classy lady and such a wonderful friend. She kept the band together. She didn't disappoint the Supremes fans. She kept the Supremes together till the 70s, 1977. Had several more hits, Stone Love and Up the Ladder to the Roof and all these great songs in the 70s. And then she has continued the classiness that she displayed in her Supremes career in her own solo career. And I'm so proud of her. If you're in the New York City area in May to June, say Memorial Day into June, Mary's going to be at the Cafe Carlyle doing her jazz act. And she is amazing.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
Somebody said to me, and you probably would have I guess, your take on this. We have a kid here, and I'm not going to mention any names, and he got promoted, he got a shot. And then as he got his shot and as he got his promotion, I said to another kid, well, it seemed like he really changed. And the kid, who's much younger than I am, maybe 30 years younger, he goes to me, no, he never changed. That's who he was the entire time, and it took that moment for it to come out.
Wow.
And I thought that was rather profound. So do you think when people read this, they'll come to the same sort of conclusion of so-and-so, this is who this person has always been and just waited for it to come out?
Positively. As witnessed very recently with the taping of the Motown 60 special, where Diana Ross had been approached by Ken Ehrlich, who produces the Grammys, who did this Motown special as well, about having a moment on the Grammy Awards where the Supremes are reunited. 3 or 4 years ago, they honored Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr. They had them together singing on the conclusion of the Grammys, and it was a big moment. So they thought that it would be wonderful to put the Supremes back together, to get Mary Wilson and Diana Ross back together. Diana Ross would have nothing to do with it. She did not want Mary Wilson's name or image anywhere on the show. She wanted to get an award herself and show, it mentioned the Supremes once, and then it talked about how great Diana Ross was. Never mentioned everyone by name. And, it's like Paul McCartney going, Beatles, who are the Beatles? It's like, hello, that's who we fell in love with, was Paul McCartney as part of the Beatles, and Diana Ross as part of the Supremes, and Mary Wilson as part of the Supremes. Diana made a deal that she would do this Motown 60 special, but not if Mary Wilson was on stage, not if Gladys Knight was on stage, not if Lionel Richie was on stage, because she can't stand any of those people.
That's what I think makes Supreme Glamour an exciting book to pick up and read. You also say that it's a deluxe coffee table book. So for those of us who are really not up on the nomenclature of these type of books, explain what that kind of deluxe coffee table book is going to look like and give us an idea of the feel of it, if you will.
It's going to be an oversized, full-color book filled with lots of pictures you've never seen of the Supremes. And it also is going to highlight the glamour and the fashion trends that the Supremes did. Oh, my God. I mean, those iconic sequin gowns.
And the hairdos.
The hairdos.
Yes.
My God, the beehives, the bouffants, everything. So, it's really going to be very visual, lots of color photos. Mary has saved so as many of those iconic gowns and sets of those gowns as she can, and she's got the gowns from the TV special TCB and GIT on Broadway with the designers like Bob Mackie and all kinds of people, famous designers doing the clothes. And she has two. As I say, Mary Wilson's so famous, she sends her wardrobe out on tour.
It's fantastic. I love it. I don't know what happened to me, but over the years, I've become, because of my daughter, a fashion connoisseur. You know why? Because I kept getting the bills for the Ugg boots. Yeah. And now I got a whole closet full of Ugg boots. I'm like, wow, those are really cool. And so therefore, I'm a big fan of fashion for whatever the reason. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this book. If someone wants to follow you on social media or on your website, what's your social media? What's your website, Twitter, any of those things?
www.markbego.com. And on Twitter, Mark Bego Author.
And you're on Facebook or what?
And I'm on Facebook as Mark Bego.
Okay, I'm going to friend you.
Thank you.
All right, before I run out of
We've
spaces.
been friends for years. We should be friends on Facebook.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. I guess
we missed that year.
I have no idea. Sometimes let's face it, you and I, we don't always think things through. All right.
Yeah, we just kind of dive in and then figure it out.
That's the problem. All right, thank you, Mark. We'll be talking to you again. I'm really excited. Big 2019 for Mark Bego. He's got the book about Elton John. What's the name of that book?
It's called Rocket Man, the Elton John Story. We just changed the title to that to key into the movie.
All right, that's great. And Supreme Glamour, which is this awesome deluxe coffee table book that will not only captivate you with the actual words that Mark puts together, but also the amazing photos, including fashion, so that you can be a rock and roll fashionista.